So, Godzilla X Kong is going to be a huge event in the Monsterverse, and stars like Sam Neill and Jack O'Connell have already been signed on for the movie. In fact, Matthew Modine has been seen in set photos in what looks like a G-Force uniform, complete with the logo and everything. Now, G-Force is basically the opposite of Monarch and hates Titans, so Modine's character could work against Monarch and try to kill Big G or even Kong and the others. In fact, the main villain could be from space, and Kong may even receive the complete armor of which the mech-glove was a part, but this is all just the tip of the iceberg. In this video, we'll be exploring 10 Godzilla X Kong supernova theories that could reshape the Monsterverse, change dynamics, and more. But before we get into things, please consider hitting those like and subscribe buttons. Those 2 small clicks from you will help us tremendously to bring you more of these marvelous videos. And now, let's begin. The new movie is about Big G and not the King Ape. So the last 2 movies from the Monsterverse, specifically Godzilla vs. Kong and Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire, pitted the 2 gargantuan titans against threats that were larger than their personal rivalry. You see, they both want to be the dominant alpha titan, but in their first collaboration, they had to fight Mecha-Godzilla, who had a bit of King Ghidorah or Monster Zero inside his artificial brain. Next, they had to team up to fight another giant ape that just wanted to take over the surface. So the movies had Godzilla as a major player, so much so that his name appeared first in the title. However, make no mistake, both movies were basically Kong movies. You see, in the first one, we see Hollow Earth for the first time and how Kong was related to it. It was all about his travel to Hollow Earth, and Godzilla was just a party pooper until he wasn't. Although Godzilla beats the crap out of Kong, we still felt for the giant ape and not the big lizard. Similarly, in the second movie, Kong did most of the heavy lifting while Big G slept like a baby through most of the runtime. In fact, even the villain was a giant ape. Naturally, people like me, who are Team Godzilla, felt slightly disappointed with how the story mostly focused on Kong, and Godzilla got hardly any screen time. As we said, Godzilla was literally snoozing in the new empire. Anyways, that could very well change with Godzilla X Kong Supernova, and in a manner we've all been wanting. We'll tell you how. So, throughout the Monsterverse movies, all we've got in the name of Godzilla's past are minute details. He appeared here and there, destroying a few things in the mid-20th century. He once fought Monster Zero in the past, put the Scar King down under, and had a beef with Kong and his kind, but that's about it. Nothing as elaborate as Kong's past. But what about his origin and how old he is, when he was born? How did he manage to live for so long? Why are Godzilla and Mothra BFFs? Well, all these questions and more could be answered in Supernova. In fact, we're of the opinion that even the villain in Supernova will be a version of Godzilla, much like the Scar King was kind of like an evil version of Kong, which brings us to our next theory. Godzilla and Kong would fight Space Godzilla in Supernova. We've had enough battles with monsters from Earth and Hollow Earth, starting with the Skull Devil and Muto. Now it's time to explore a few of the alien monsters. I mean, King Ghidorah was also an alien, but he was ultimately stuck on Earth for eons, so let's not consider him. But why all of this alien talk suddenly? Well, the movie's title, that is Supernova, hints at something cosmic in the cards. Space Godzilla is basically Big G's uber-powerful doppelganger who has a bit of Big G's DNA within him. You see, a bit of Godzilla's DNA somehow managed to find its way to a black hole, which is basically formed because of a supernova explosion. This DNA then emerged from a white hole and was mixed with all those crystal-based organisms already present in the vicinity, and Space Godzilla came to life from this cosmic splicing of DNA. If you've been a Godzilla fan, you would know that Space Godzilla has been one of his greatest and most dangerous enemies, and Godzilla might need a helping hand from Kong. Space G looks kinda like Godzilla, but with major differences, like a more bestial face, a longer tail, and white crystals instead of the usual dorsal spines. In fact, Space G also has a yellow-gold crystal crest on the top of his head, 3 large crystals at the tip of his tail, and 2 massive crystals erupting from his shoulders. He uses these to draw energy from his environment. Now, ever since the title was announced, actors related to the movie have used those space emojis whenever they posted something about Godzilla X Kong Supernova. This has also led to increased speculation about the presence of a space monster in the movie. However, some are arguing that instead of Space Godzilla, it could be someone else, like Gigan, who is basically a giant alien monster who looks reptilian but was turned into a cyborg by the alien race known as the Nebulans. But that's not all about the villain. There are some theories floating around, according to which The main bad guy is an original Monsterverse monster, not a Toho monster. To understand this, you and I must explore the reason behind it. The thing is, it costs Legendary a great deal to be able to bring Toho monsters into their movies, and it's not even like you pay them once for a monster and use it forever. You gotta keep paying a huge amount of money every time you want to use the character. For instance, during the filming of The New Empire, no one knew if they were going to secure Mothra once more, so director Adam Wingard had a new monster created especially for the movie, and it was called Phosphera. It was also shown in a wall carving in Hollow Earth, of course carved by the Iwi people. Appearance-wise, it was slightly humanoid with long hands that were basically wings. It could stand upright and had a crest on its head, and according to some reports, it cost Legendary tens of millions each time they get a monster of Toho, so it only made sense to have their own monsters. That way, Legendary saved a lot of money. In fact, Godzilla X Kong had two original monsters. We're talking about Shimo and Scar King, and the movie was an immense success. Keeping this in mind, Legendary might not want to bring in Gigan or Space Godzilla or any of the Toho villains. Additionally, what if Toho doesn't want to give away one of its monsters? You see, work has already started on the sequel to the Academy Award-winning Godzilla -1. Maybe they would want all their IPs to themselves when the time to shoot Supernova comes. Regardless, we think it's absolutely mental how the rights for this giant fictional lizard are more expensive than hiring one or even two real-life Hollywood actors. Project Powerhouse would see its completion, and Kong would get an entire armor. After Shimo's frostbite blast froze Kong's arm stiff, Trapper Beasley brought up a half-forgotten Monarch initiative called Project Powerhouse. We have a theory about Trapper 2, which we'll discuss at the end. Anyways, the idea was to level the playing field by building tech that would help Kong stand his ground if another Titan turned hostile. Post-Mechagodzilla, it made sense. But the higher-ups had pulled the plug because they were wary of giving such immense power to Kong, and their fear wasn't exactly unjustified. If Kong ever turned on them, a souped-up version would be harder to stop than any of his enemies. Still, one armored glove had already been engineered to enhance strength, channel electricity, and provide healing. Beasley retrieved it from Monarch Outpost 1 and brought it straight to the Hollow Earth. The prototype, called the BEAST glove, which was short for Bioenhanced Anatomic Seismic Thunder, latched onto Kong's frostbitten hand and started repairing tissue damage almost immediately. At first, he struggled to move with it. His usual balance was thrown off by the added weight and unfamiliar structure, but it didn't take long for Kong to get used to it. Moments later, he struck the ground with enough force to create a localized shockwave. From there, the glove proved its worth. In Egypt, Kong knocked Godzilla flat and kept swinging. Deep underground, it stopped the Scar King's axe and absorbed the lash of his whip. By the time the fight reached Rio, Kong had found his rhythm. One punch cracked the Scar King's jaw, another deflected a building in midair. Most importantly, it shielded him from another blast of Shimo's breath, and this time he didn't fall. So, it would make sense for Kong to get the entire Project Powerhouse armor in the new movie, since he and Big G would be facing a pretty serious threat, which brings us to our next point. We need the threat to be bigger. The stakes would be significantly higher this time around. You see, the Monsterverse movies up until this point have progressed in a straight-line graph when it comes to raising the stakes. The first act sets the tone, the second act introduces the monster and its powers, and the third act has it dead. However, this formula can only work for so many movies. They need to do something absolutely wild in the first act of Godzilla X Kong Supernova, and by that, I mean they need to kill a Titan, probably the most powerful yet expendable one. When Mothra died, people in the theaters felt the pain. The theaters either went silent or were filled with gloom and echoes of sighs. Likewise, be it a monster from Godzilla's ancient past or someone created especially for the film, they need to define just how terrifying the new monster is by having a Titan kill. We believe the most obvious casualty is Shimo. That guy is probably the most powerful Titan after Godzilla, and killing Shimo would send shockwaves that people need from a Monsterverse movie. I mean, you gotta raise the stakes and make it seem like the heroes can be defeated by the villain, or else what's the difference between a good movie and a cartoonish story where you're more than sure the good guys will win? It would be sad to see just any Titan die, but that's what's needed. Oh, and we don't think killing Mothra would have the same profound effect because she already died once on screen and came back, so her immortality has been established, and even if she does die, we know she'll come back at some point in the future. We might just get to see Godzilla Jr. We initially theorized that they might make Supernova a Godzilla-centric movie, and the way to do so would be by introducing Space Godzilla. Now, the interesting thing about Space Godzilla is that he has already appeared once in live action. In the 1994 movie, Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, it seemed like Godzilla's cells had a habit of ending up in the wrong place. In this case, they hitch a ride into space, first via Biollante in 1990, then Mothra in 93, and get bathed in radiation from a black hole, and then Space Godzilla comes to life. Soon, he heads for Earth. Back on Boss Island, the UN's Godzilla Countermeasure Center sends Koji Shinjo and Kiyoki Sato to plant a mind control device on Godzilla. It's exactly as reckless as it sounds. Psychic Miki Segusa, who's been a part of this saga long enough to know when things are going sideways, gets a visit from the cosmos by Mothra's twin priestesses, who tell her the real problem was actually on its way. Here we meet Moguera, Moguera, a clunky JSDF-built replacement for Mechagodzilla, which fails to stop Space Godzilla's descent. The alien lands on Bass Island and attacks Godzilla's son, Little, by encasing him in a crystalline cage. Godzilla steps in but gets overpowered and watches helplessly as Space Godzilla takes off towards Japan. Godzilla follows, they fight and stuff, but in the end, everyone gets a happy ending, and little Godzilla gets back to blowing atomic bubbles. So yeah, they could introduce Godzilla Jr. with or without Space Godzilla, and nothing would make it a more Godzilla movie than that. I mean, they gave Kong a childlike entity in the form of Suko, so why can't Big G serve as someone's old man? That only seems fair. This would also lead to another generation of baby titans that could take the mantles from their dads and mums sometime in the future. You know, kind of like a Teen Titans sort of deal. I wonder if that name's available. We could see a G-Force versus Monarch battle. You see, several big names have already been attached to the upcoming movie. Among the confirmed actors are Caitlin Dever, Jack O'Connell, Alicia Debnam Carey, Sam Neill, and Matthew Modine as a general of some sort. Now, there were a few leaked photos from the set which had Mr. Modine wearing a uniform with a logo that looks suspiciously similar to the logo of G-Force. Now, this is basically the military arm of the United Nations Godzilla Countermeasure Center, a body that strives to kill Godzilla once and for all. And if Modine is the general, he'll try to take Big G down. And you see, he already has a thing for playing negative or morally ambiguous roles. He did that in Stranger Things and even in The Dark Knight Rises, although his character was redeemed in the Batman film. Anyways, the point is that while Monarch tried to save the Titans and help them in helping humanity, G-Force sees the Titans as threats that need to be eliminated at the earliest convenience. Most Monsterverse stories lack the human element, and this would add new dynamics to the whole mix. However, the G-Force versus Monarch battle will have to be dealt with carefully because additional subplots don't always improve a movie's story. If there's a Space Godzilla, there might even be a Moguera or Jet Jaguar. Robots and kaiju have a complicated relationship. In most cases, it ends with something exploding, but every now and then, the right piece of hardware proves essential. That's what happened in Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, where humanity's mechanical backup plan, Moguera, stepped in when Godzilla faced one of his nastiest cosmic problems to date. Now, as the Monsterverse stares down a future full of titans, wormholes, and God knows what else, it feels like only a matter of time before someone brings another mech into the ring, either out of desperation or sheer arrogance. Moguera has done this dance before. First created for the 1957 film The Mysterians, the original version wasn't much of a hero. It flattened villages and collapsed under its own weight when it got too close to a Markolite cannon. The concept was later revived in the Heisei era, this time as the Mobile Operations Godzilla Universal Expert Robot Aero type. A mouthful of a name, but a proper G-Force weapon built to do what Mechagodzilla couldn't. Its job wasn't to escort kaiju politely off the premises, it was designed to destroy Godzilla. Things didn't go exactly to plan though. When Space Godzilla began closing in on Earth in 1994, Moguera was launched to intercept him in orbit. The battle didn't go well. Moguera took a beating and limped home, but it wasn't down for good. After repairs, it was sent to Fukuoka, where Space Godzilla had transformed the city into a spiked fortress and imprisoned Godzilla's son in a crystal prison. This time, Moguera wasn't alone. Godzilla arrived with a personal stake in the fight. Between the two of them, they brought down Space Godzilla's power conduit, the Fukuoka Tower, and eventually the creature itself, though Moguera didn't survive the final blast. Across films and side media like Godzilla Island, different versions of Moguera have popped up again and again. Meanwhile, Jet Jaguar, another fan-favorite robot, took a stranger path. First introduced in Godzilla vs. Megalon, he was meant to be a controllable servant until he gained sentience, rewrote his own code, and summoned Godzilla for help. The two beat back Megalon and Gigan, and Jet Jaguar walked away like a pro. He returned in various forms, including a firefighter and a medic in Godzilla Island, and even starred in Godzilla Singular Point, where he fought to his literal last breath against Godzilla Ultima. If there's one thing the franchise has taught us, it's that when all else fails, humanity builds something tall and sends it charging at a monster. Whether that ends in triumph or wreckage depends on how much they've learned since the last time. We could see the Titan version of the Avengers. It wouldn't be the first time kaiju have set their differences aside for something worse. Back in Destroy All Monsters from 1968, Godzilla led Earth's monsters into battle against King Ghidorah, and it worked. Not because they were friends, but because the alternative was extinction. Godzilla X Kong, the new empire, teased the beginnings of a similar alliance, but if Supernova raises the stakes high enough, this time we might just see a proper call to arms. And not just a few cameos, but an actual Titan war. In Monarch's books, Titans come in two types: protectors and destroyers. Godzilla, Kong, and Behemoth, they defend balance. Rodan, Scylla, Tiamat, they don't. But when a threat big enough shows up, categories blur. Ghidorah proved that. He roared once from Isla Dimara, and most of the planet's titans turned feral. If Godzilla can tap into the same influence but with a unified purpose, Supernova could bring about a moment that reshapes the entire Monsterverse. The setup's already baked in. Godzilla holds the Alpha Mantle. Kong now wields ancient Titan tech. The Hollow Earth remains full of forgotten creatures. If whatever's coming threatens all of it, even destroyer types might get pulled into the fray. It's a gamble for sure, but if done right, it could be the Monsterverse's biggest event since Skull Island rose from the sea. Trapper could lead to Jet Jaguar. Dan Stevens' Trapper is going to be back for Supernova, which is pretty exciting news because even the likes of Rebecca Hall and Kaylee Hoddle, who played Dr. Eileen Andrews and Gia respectively, haven't been confirmed as cast for Supernova, and we know that these two were integral to Kong's story and appeared in multiple movies. So, Dan Stevens' return might finally open the door for something fans have waited decades to see. I'm talking about the good robot kaiju named Jet Jaguar. In The New Empire, Trapper helped craft the Beast Gauntlet for Kong, which was basically a tech-heavy glove born from leftover Mechagodzilla research and was originally part of something called Project Powerhouse. That glove let Kong absorb and counter Shimo's Frostbite Blast, the most powerful single attack in the multiverse. Monarch had cut funding before a full exosuit could be built, but after two narrowly averted apocalypses, governments may be more willing to invest. This time, instead of arming a Titan, Monarch might build one of their own. Jet Jaguar has been in Godzilla lore for quite a while now, first appearing in Godzilla vs. Megalon as a human-sized robot who self-activated and scaled up to fight alongside Godzilla. The Monsterverse version probably won't be sentient, but a piloted robot like the early Mechagodzilla model, and Trapper, with his field experience and Titan physiology background, fits the pilot role better than anyone else. He's a scientist, a mechanic, and not a stranger to kaiju-sized mayhem, mishaps, and messes. If anyone's gonna punch a world-killing monster with a 6-story robot fist, it's him. If Jet Jaguar enters the scene, it would serve not as a replacement for Godzilla or Kong, but as backup, a last resort, the one line of defense between a new threat and planetary ruin. And while nobody's officially said the word crossover, the idea of Trapper's Jet Jaguar acting like a Pacific Rim-style Jaeger isn't out of the question. The pieces are in place, the tone is right, the door is open, and all that's missing is the robot.